The Victorian Cthulhu Prequels presents The Hole in the Mountain, Part 1. The afternoon sun filtered through Professor Blackwood's study windows, casting shadows across the book-lined walls. The professor and Nathaniel Milbane sat at his desk in contemplative silence, each absorbed in studying a collection of weathered notes and journals. "You know, Professor, I made Miss Pemberton a promise to ensure you would not spend all your time lost in pursuit of old journals and ancient artifacts," Nathaniel observed, "and yet here I am, assisting you in that very endeavour." "Indeed, but you must admit this mysterious parcel is extraordinarily intriguing," Blackwood replied without looking up, his trained mind quite capable of concentrating and conversing simultaneously. "You say you received these documents anonymously?" "Correct. Just 1 week after the events in Wapping concluded. It seems unlikely to be mere coincidence, especially given the contents." Nathaniel nodded for the professor to continue as he studied a hand-drawn map among the papers. The material centers around a detailed journal written in 1844 by one Private Jonathan Brady. There appears to be something of great significance here, but piecing it all together presents quite a challenge. "Piecing things together is my speciality, Professor," Nathaniel replied, beginning to methodically organize the notes and sketches. "Let us see if we can reconstruct this story." For London, the summer of 1844 had been mild, but today the sun shone down on Gower Street as Private Jonathan Brady stood before the brass nameplate, reading Professor C. Penrose, Department of Anthropological Studies. He straightened his modest coat and checked his pocket watch, confirming he was precisely on time. Brady hesitated before the door. The months since his return from Hong Kong had been difficult. Civilian employment proved elusive for a young man whose primary qualifications involved military service. The advertisement in the Times had been brief. Expedition guard required. 1-month voyage. Previous military service preferred. Substantial remuneration. For a former private still adjusting to the tedium of London life, it represented both employment and escape. "Enter," came a booming voice in response to his knock. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, their spines bearing titles in languages he could not identify. Maps covered the available surfaces, showing continents and coastlines in detail. The air carried scents of tobacco, old parchment, and something faintly exotic. Professor Charles Penrose dominated the space behind an enormous desk. A man of perhaps 50 years with a meticulously groomed beard and burgundy velvet waistcoat, his eyes bright with perpetual curiosity. Every gesture he made seemed calculated for dramatic effect. Brady stepped into the room and immediately snapped to attention, heels together, shoulders back, eyes fixed straight ahead. "Private Brady, I presume." Penrose rose from his chair. "A red coat, huh? Jolly good man." He strode around the desk, tapping Brady lightly on the arm with his walking cane. "No need for all that military bearing in here, my good fellow. Do sit. This is my colleague, Mr. Thaddeus Wren." Mr. Wren appeared perhaps 2 years his senior, with tidy hair and observant eyes. Where Penrose commanded the room through presence, the young assistant absorbed it, watching with quiet intelligence. His clothing was well tailored but understated. "Please be seated," Wren said, his voice carrying gentle authority. "The professor has some rather unusual questions for you." Brady lowered himself into the offered chair, maintaining the rigid posture that had become second nature. "Yes, sir. At your disposal, sir." Penrose chuckled. "Excellent bearing, young man. Military service teaches admirable discipline. Now then, before we discuss particulars, I require your honest assessment of something quite extraordinary." He turned to retrieve 3 framed paintings from behind his desk, each roughly 2 feet square. With theatrical flourish, he arranged them before Brady in a neat row. "Tell me, Private, what observations do you make regarding these works?" Brady was confused by such an unexpected first question, but dutifully studied the paintings carefully. Each depicted the same scene, a dramatic mountain rising from coastal waters, distinguished by an extraordinary hole that pierced completely through its peak. The artistic styles differed markedly, precise scientific detail, romantic brushwork, and bold, imposing strokes. "Sir, they appear to show the same location," Brady replied carefully. "The mountain formation is identical in each, though the artistic approaches vary considerably." "Precisely." Penrose's enthusiasm was infectious. "And what else strikes you as remarkable?" Brady examined them more closely. "The perspective appears consistent, sir. Each artist seems to have painted from the same vantage point." "Excellent observation. Mr. Wren, did I not predict our young soldier would possess keen eyes?" Wren nodded approvingly. "Most would focus on the obvious differences in painting style. You see the underlying consistency." Penrose leaned forward conspiratorially. These three works were painted by artists separated by continents and decades. The leftmost by a German naturalist who has never travelled beyond the Rhine. The centre by a French romantic who spent his entire career in Normandy. The rightmost by an American watercolourist. Brady felt his breath catch. "Sir, that seems extraordinary." "Indeed it does. When questioned, each artist claimed the image came from imagination. Recently, however, there has been somewhat of a breakthrough for this mystery. This has, in fact, turned out to be a real location. A location on the Norwegian coast, a formation called Torghatten." The silence stretched as Penrose and Wren both stared at Brady, as if waiting keenly for his response to this revelation. "You mentioned employment, sir," Brady ventured. "Ah, yes, directly to business. Admirable." Penrose clasped his hands. "We require security for a month-long expedition to investigate this phenomenon. General protection, maritime assistance, various support functions. We can offer you £10 for your service, plus expenses, of course." £10 plus expenses represented nearly a year's military pay. "Yes, sir, most generous, sir. What dangers might require security?" Wren exchanged a glance with Penrose. "Maritime risks," he replied smoothly. "Remote locations, unpredictable weather, unfriendly locals, wild animals, nothing beyond an experienced soldier's capabilities." "Wild animals, sir?" Brady asked. "Yes, you know, wolves, bears, things of that nature." Penrose gestured expansively with his cane. "Do they have those white ones up there?" he asked, turning to Wren. Wren's expression remained carefully neutral, though Brady detected a hint of poorly concealed disdain. "You mean polar bears?" "Exactly." "Well, Professor, I'm an archaeologist, not a naturalist, so I haven't the faintest idea," Wren said dryly. "But probably." Penrose's eyes lit up with sudden enthusiasm. "By Jove, how marvellous it would be if we could bag a polar bear. Think of it, where would we mount its head? The faculty dining room, perhaps?" Wren cleared his throat deliberately. "Perhaps we might return to the practical requirements of the expedition?" Quite right, Penrose said, though his attention seemed already to have moved on. "Do you still possess your service rifle, Brady?" "No, sir." "Ah, well then." Penrose turned to Wren with renewed authority. "See that this man is equipped with the finest rifle Her Majesty's forces can provide, nothing but the best for our expedition." "There is, however, a complicating factor," Penrose admitted, his theatrical manner temporarily subdued. "We face competition." A rival expedition led by Dr. Harold Brown departed 2 weeks ago aboard a schooner called the Marlin. They seek the same destination for similar purposes. "A race, sir?" "A race to solve the mystery," Penrose declared. "Academic rivalry, you understand. Dr. Brown and I have philosophical differences. That old fool will take a month writing notes. We must rely on speed and intellectual rigour. Do you think you can assist us, Mr. Brady?" Competition he understood from military campaigns. The destination remained mysterious, but £10 plus expenses would solve his financial concerns and provide escape from London's routine. "Yes, sir, I accept your offer, sir," he said formally. "When do we depart, sir?" "Monday next, dawn-tide. We sail aboard the Ketch Arena from the East Docks. Pack light. Warm clothing will be supplied." Penrose extended his hand. "Welcome to the expedition, Private Brady." As Brady shook hands with both men, He noticed Wren's grip lingered slightly longer than necessary, as though evaluating his measure. The young archaeologist's smile was pleasant enough, but something in his eyes suggested calculations beyond mere courtesy. Outside, Brady pulled his coat against the London chill. £10 plus expenses seemed almost too good to be true, yet his restless spirit craved adventure beyond civilian life's tedium. Behind him, through the office window, he glimpsed Penrose and Wren in animated discussion. Their body language suggested disagreement, though he could not discern the subject. As he walked toward his modest lodgings, Brady found himself wondering what academic rivalry could justify such substantial expenditure on security. The paintings remained vivid, that strange mountain with its impossible hole rendered by artists who claimed never to have seen it. Something about the image troubled him. That night, Brady stared at the ceiling, imagining what awaited them. His dreams were filled with distant waves and a mountain shadow that watched with ancient eyes. Dawn broke grey over the Thames as Brady made his way to the East Docks. The city stirred with commerce, costermongers, chimney sweeps, and cart clatter. The air carried scents of coal, smoke, river mud, and salt water. The arena proved smaller than anticipated, though seaworthy. The 60-foot ketch showed regular maintenance, riding the swells with steady confidence. "Brady! Excellent timing," called Professor Penrose from the dock, wearing practical travelling clothes. "Allow me to introduce Captain Toft." The captain was weathered, with sun-darkened skin and alert eyes. His handshake was firm but brief, his assessment swift and practical. "Military service?" Toft's voice carried the efficient tone of a man unaccustomed to wasting words. "Yes, sir. Infantry recently discharged." "Good. Can you splice rope, 10 sail?" "I can learn quickly, sir." "See that you do. We've no passengers aboard my vessel. Everyone works." Toft turned to address the small group assembling on deck. "Cast off in 20 minutes. Stow personal gear below immediately." Brady hurried to comply, carrying his sea bag to the cramped quarters below. Everything was efficiently arranged for extended voyages. Brady worked alongside the only other crew member, a tall Norwegian named Red Vikland. The man possessed quiet competence, checking rigging methodically. "Mind the boom when we come about," Vikland warned, securing a line. "Captain Toft runs a tight ship, but the river can be treacherous with morning traffic." Brady nodded, filing away the information. His military training emphasized learning local conditions quickly, and maritime service clearly possessed its own particular hazards and protocols. Thames traffic was challenging. Steam packets, barges, and smaller craft in constant navigation. Captain Toft handled it with practiced ease. As London gave way to the estuary, Brady felt anticipation and uncertainty. The last glimpse of landmarks reminded him he was leaving everything known for distant uncertainty. "Magnificent sight, is it not?" said a voice from behind, which startled Brady from his reverie. "Dr. Dalton, and you must be Private Brady." "It's just Mr. Brady now, sir." "Well then, if it's just Mr., then there is no need for the sir," Dalton said warmly. The expedition's physician had emerged from below deck, where he had apparently been arranging his medical supplies. He was a man of perhaps 35 years, with kind eyes and the sort of reassuring presence that would comfort patients in distress. "Penrose's note said you were medically discharged, is that right?" "Yes, sir. I mean, doctor. Dysentery. A very unpleasant time." "I imagine it would have been. All better now?" "Yes, doctor." "Well, if you need anything, just ask." Brady found himself relaxing in the doctor's presence, where Penrose commanded through force of personality and Wren observed with calculating intelligence. Dalton offered simple human warmth. His manner suggested genuine interest in Brady's comfort and well-being. "Have you sailed extensively, Dr. Dalton?" "Some. Medical training required travel to various hospitals, and I spent a year working with ship's surgeons to understand maritime medicine. The human body responds differently to the stresses of ocean travel. Changes in diet, confined quarters, the constant motion, fascinating from a physiological perspective." Their conversation was interrupted by Professor Penrose's dramatic appearance on deck. "Gentlemen, before we lose sight of our native shores entirely, I believe a brief exposition of our mission would be appropriate." He gestured grandly toward the assembled group. "First, let me ensure no introductions remain to be made. Mr. Thaddeus Wren, my research assistant, Harvey Dalton, our physician, and Jonathan Brady, our security." "Excellent." He gestured grandly toward the receding coastline. "We embark upon a quest to solve a delightful mystery. Those paintings I showed you, Brady, represent evidence of some phenomenon that defies easy explanation." Wren emerged from the chart room carrying a leather portfolio. "The professor's enthusiasm sometimes outpaces scientific rigor," he said with a slight smile. "However, the evidence does suggest something remarkable. 3 artists, completely unknown to each other, painting identical perspectives of a real location they claim never to have seen. The causes might point to things that we, as humans, do not yet understand." "What do you hope to find there, sir?" Brady asked. "We won't know, my young friend, until we get there," Penrose declared. "Dr. Brown believes the answer lies in geological magnetism, some property of the rock formation that projects images across vast distances. Nonsense, of course. The truth, I'm sure, is far more profound." Dalton listened thoughtfully. From a medical perspective, shared visions or dreams are not unknown. Certain fevers or atmospheric conditions can produce remarkably similar hallucinations among different individuals. "Precisely the sort of mundane explanation I expected from Dr. Brown," Penrose said dismissively. "Mark my words, when we reach Torghatten, we will discover something that challenges the very foundations of natural philosophy." As if summoned by mention of their rival, Captain Toft called from the helm, "Professor, you should know, the Marlin's departure was noted in shipping records. Larger vessel, experienced Arctic crew. They'll have reached Norwegian waters by now." Penrose's expression darkened. "Then we must pray for favourable winds and Dr. Brown's customary over-caution. Time is of the essence, gentlemen." Brady noticed Wren's slight frown at this pronouncement. The young archaeologist seemed less convinced that haste served their interests, though he offered no direct disagreement. Such careful diplomacy reminded Brady of junior officers who disagreed with their superiors but lacked the authority or inclination to voice opposition directly. As afternoon settled over the North Sea, Brady found himself assigned to various ship's duties under Vickland's patient instruction. The Norwegian proved an excellent teacher, explaining the fundamentals of sail handling and maritime safety with the thorough competence of someone who had learned these lessons through hard experience. "The sea teaches humility," Vickland observed as they secured lines against the freshening breeze. "Those who think they master her quickly discover their error. Respect the water, and she may permit your passage. Assume dominance, and she will destroy you without thought." "Sound philosophy for any endeavour," Brady replied, testing the knots as instructed. "Indeed, I have sailed these waters since boyhood. The North Sea can be savage, but Norwegian fjords hold different dangers, ancient places where the old stories still carry weight." Brady looked up sharply. "Old stories?" Vickland glanced around, ensuring they were not overheard. "My grandmother spoke of things that dwelt in deep water and beneath certain mountains. Sailors' tales, perhaps, but old sailors live longer than young fools who ignore warnings." Before Brady could pursue this intriguing comment, Professor Penrose called for assembly in the small galley. "Gentlemen, we must discuss our strategy for closing the gap with Dr. Brown's expedition." As the 5 men gathered around the narrow table, Brady sensed undercurrents of tension he could not fully understand. Academic rivalry seemed insufficient to explain the intensity of Penrose's determination or the calculating look that occasionally crossed Wren's features. Dr. Dalton maintained his pleasant demeanour, but even he seemed affected by the expedition's underlying urgency. Outside, the English coast had vanished into evening mist, leaving only the endless expanse of dark water ahead. Brady found himself wondering, not for the first time, what exactly they hoped to find in Norwegian waters, and whether some discoveries might prove better left undisturbed. That night, Lying in his hammock as the arena rolled gently through the swells, Brady dreamed of a mountain rising from cold northern seas. In his dream, the great hole through the stone seemed less like a natural formation and more like a gateway, though he could not say what lay beyond its shadowed threshold. 10 days of favourable winds had carried the arena across the North Sea to Bergen, then north along the spectacular Norwegian coast. On their 12th day from London, Torghatten's distinctive silhouette became visible, its remarkable hull clearly defined against the Arctic sky. "There she is, gentlemen," Captain Toft announced, "but we'll make our first landing at the settlement on the mainland. Vicland says the locals may have information." The modest settlement comprised a dozen traditional structures arranged along a protected cove. "Show respect for their customs," Vicland cautioned as they prepared the ship's boat. The village elder who greeted them was a woman of perhaps 60 years, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that held accumulated wisdom. When she spoke, her voice carried natural authority. Vicland conducted the initial conversation, occasionally gesturing toward Torghatten. The elder's expression grew grave as he explained their purpose. "She says her name is Maret," Vicland translated. "She warns that seeking knowledge of the mountain is dangerous curiosity." Professor Penrose stepped forward. "Good woman, we are scholars seeking to understand phenomena associated with Torghatten. We would be grateful for any traditional knowledge." After translation, Maret studied Penrose before responding. "She asks what you truly seek beneath the mountain," Vicland translated. "Artists paint its image without ever having seen it," Wren explained. "We hope to understand how this occurs." After translation, Maret nodded gravely. "She says you speak of the spirit," Vicland translated. "The elders before me warned of the spirit beneath the mountain's hole. It dreams, and its dreams reach across water to touch susceptible minds." Brady felt a chill. "Spirit?" "Old beyond memory," Vicland translated Maret's response. "It rests beneath the mountain, but its sleep is unnatural. Its dreams spill into the waking world." "Fascinating." Penrose leaned forward eagerly. "Have your people developed methods for communicating with this entity?" After translation, Maret's expression grew stern. "She says what lies beneath Torghatten does not converse. It commands, corrupts, consumes," Vicland reported. "But surely there must be rituals for contacting the spirit world," Penrose pressed. "She says the ritual exists, but warns against its use. The spirit's touch changes people." "Nonsense," Penrose declared. "We are educated men, not primitive superstitionists. If a ritual exists, we must experience it firsthand." Maret's face hardened as Vicland translated. "She says knowledge offers no protection. The spirit has touched many learned men. Their knowledge became its knowledge." 40 summers ago, learned men came asking similar questions, Vicland translated. Only one returned, changed, eyes holding cold light, voice carrying inhuman echoes. Penrose grew visibly impatient. "We appreciate your traditions, but we require practical information. Will you perform this ritual or not?" Maret's refusal was evident before translation. The standoff stretched until Brady stepped forward, holding his service knife on its side. "Please," Brady said, gesturing for Vicland to translate, "accept this knife as a gift, in return for your information and out of respect for your wisdom." Maret examined the well-made British steel carefully, testing its edge. Her expression softened, and she spoke to Vicland at length. "She says the young soldier shows proper respect," Vicland translated. "She will perform the ceremony, but only the soldier may participate." His gesture shows he might resist the spirit's influence, while the others carry too much pride and ambition. Brady's mouth went dry. "Ma'am, I'm not certain." "She says you understand perfectly," Vicland translated. "Better it touch someone who can resist through strength of will rather than arrogance of intellect." Penrose looked ready to object, but Vicland spoke quietly in Norwegian. The professor stepped back with obvious reluctance. "Very well," Penrose agreed tightly. "Private Brady will represent our expedition's interests." As arrangements were made for the evening ceremony, Brady gazed across the water toward Torghatton's imposing bulk. The mountain's great hole seemed to watch him in return, patient and utterly indifferent to human concerns. As evening settled, Brady sat in the traditional kota with Maret, who handed him a cup of dark, bitter liquid. "Drink slowly," Maret instructed through Vikland. "The spirit will show you what it wishes you to see." Brady accepted the cup reluctantly. Outside, he could hear Penrose and Wren speaking excitedly, treating this as academic fieldwork rather than the dangerous encounter Maret had described. The liquid's effects came quickly. Brady's consciousness detached from his body as the vision began. He found himself floating above dark waters under a starless sky. Below, something vast moved through the depths, and the water itself seemed alive with intelligence. The perspective shifted. Now he stood upon a desolate shore facing Torghatton. Though the mountain appeared ancient and wrong, the great hole gaped like a mouth.
"Come to me."
The words formed in Brady's mind with irresistible authority. A figure emerged from the mountain's shadow, roughly human but moving with fluid grace beneath dark robes. Where hands should be, shadowy appendages writhed like tentacles.
"I was ancient when your kind crawled from mud. I offer partnership, your brief flame joined to my eternal purpose."
"Who are you?" Brady forced himself to ask. The hooded figure paused, considering.
"Names are chains, yet if you require syllables."
The name impressed itself upon Brady's consciousness with terrible force.
"Nai, Ar, Lath, O, Tep. I am the crawling chaos, messenger between worlds. I offer your kind purpose, to serve as instruments in reshaping your world according to older designs."
Brady saw visions of vast cities rising from ocean depths, humanity transformed beyond recognition, serving alien purposes.
"This is what comes,"
the entity continued.
"Your species stumbles toward extinction. I offer survival through service."
"And if we refuse?" The figure's laugh cracked like ice over deep water.
"I hope you do refuse. Resistance adds flavor to eventual surrender. I am patient. All seekers find their way to my embrace."
The vision pulled Brady through the hole into the mountain's depths. In the deepest chamber lay a vast pool containing something that defied description. Not quite a man, not quite a beast, its surface shifting between black and blue.
"Behold the dreamer whose visions reach across the world,"
Nyarlathotep declared.
"Its dreams plant seeds in fertile minds. The artist who painted my mountain home received their inspiration from this source."
Brady understood with horrible clarity. The entity was broadcasting visions across vast distances. The paintings had been products of this influence.
"Now you understand,"
the figure continued.
"To gather those who can perceive, to prepare instruments for transformation."
The vision began to fade, but not before Brady glimpsed Dr. Dalton standing at the pool's edge, his face transformed by rapture and terror. Their expedition was not academic investigation, but a trap, carefully prepared.
"Remember,"
Nyarlathotep's voice followed him.
"Prepare your companions for the transformation they have traveled so far to receive."
Brady jerked back to awareness, drenched in cold sweat. Maret watched him with ancient sadness. "Now you know," she said quietly. "Now you understand why we warn against seeking the spirit's attention." "It's planning something," Brady managed. "Yes, your expedition hastens its awakening. We have to warn the others." Maret shook her head. "They will not listen. The spirit's call grows stronger as one approaches the mountain. They will dismiss your vision as superstition." Brady knew she was right. Even now, the vision's details grew slippery in memory. Only the core truth remained. They were walking into a carefully prepared trap. Outside, unnatural fog rolled in from the sea. As Brady emerged, he felt unseen eyes watching. Tomorrow they would sail directly into the spirit's embrace. In Professor Blackwood's study, Nathaniel set down Brady's journal with a troubled expression. It cannot be a coincidence that Thaddeus Wren features in this tale. He must have been a very young man at this point. He flicked over the last few pages of the journal as he thought about what he had read so far. Brady's account becomes increasingly detailed and disturbing from this point, he observed. Either he possessed remarkable imagination, or he witnessed exactly what he describes, Blackwood finished grimly. The name he recorded, Nyarlathotep, appears in several texts we consulted during our own investigations. An entity of considerable malevolence, if the accounts are accurate. Let's continue, Nathaniel suggested. Brady's next entries describe their approach to Torghatten itself. Dawn brought no relief from the oppressive fog that had settled over the waters during the night. Brady woke from troubled sleep to find the arena shrouded in mist so thick that the settlement on shore had vanished completely. The silence was profound and unnatural. No bird calls, no sound of waves against the hull, only the muffled voices of his companions as they prepared for departure. Extraordinary weather phenomenon, Professor Penrose declared as he emerged from below deck. Quite providential, actually. This fog should conceal our approach to Torghatten from any observers Dr. Brown might have attracted. Brady watched the professor's animated preparations with growing unease. Marrett's prediction had proven accurate. Penrose showed no interest in hearing about the previous night's vision. When Brady had attempted to describe his experience, the academic had dismissed it as fascinating anthropological data while remaining focused entirely on their mission's practical aspects. "Feeling better this morning, Brady?" Dr. Dalton inquired with his customary kindness. "Vickland was very reluctant to discuss the ceremony you undertook. I hope it wasn't too taxing." "I'm well enough, sir," Brady replied carefully, "though I confess the experience was unsettling." Quite understandable. Traditional shamanic practices can produce vivid hallucinations, particularly when combined with unfamiliar plant extracts. The human mind often interprets such experiences as profound spiritual encounters. Even Dr. Dalton, the most genuinely caring member of their expedition, regarded Brady's warnings as symptoms of his experience. Only Wren seemed to register any concern, though his interest appeared more calculating than sympathetic. "What exactly did you see?" the young archaeologist asked quietly as they prepared the arena for departure. Brady considered his response carefully. Something in Wren's tone suggested he might be more receptive to unconventional possibilities than his companions. "A warning," Brady replied finally, "about what waits for us at the mountain." Wren studied him thoughtfully. "What sort of warning?" "That we're expected, that our expedition serves purposes we don't understand. I think it is unwise to approach any closer, sir." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Wren's features, then his expression hardened with what Brady recognized as academic ambition, overwhelming prudent caution. "Interesting perspective," Wren said dismissively, "though I suspect local superstitions may have colored your interpretation." As the arena slipped her moorings and began picking her way carefully through the fog-shrouded waters, Brady felt the weight of isolation settling over him. His vision had provided clear warning of danger ahead, yet he found himself powerless to convince anyone else of its significance. Military experience had taught him to trust intelligence regardless of its source, but academic minds apparently required different standards of evidence. Captain Toft navigated by compass and instinct, occasionally calling out soundings to Vickland as they felt their way through waters made treacherous by reduced visibility. The fog seemed to muffle even their own voices, creating an atmosphere of dreamlike disconnection from normal reality. "According to our calculations," Penrose announced, consulting his charts, "we should reach the painting's perspective point within 2 hours." The exact location from which those mysterious artists drew their inspiration. Brady remembered that location from his vision, the desolate shore where Nyarlathotep had first appeared. The coincidence seemed too perfect, another indication that their expedition was proceeding according to some predetermined plan. The fog began to thin as they approached Torghatten, revealing the mountain's distinctive silhouette emerging from the mist like something from a fever dream. The great hole dominated the formation's profile, and Brady felt an involuntary shudder as he recalled the entity that lurked within those shadows. "Magnificent," Penrose breathed. "Absolutely magnificent. Now we must find the exact perspective depicted in the paintings, then we'll have the precise vantage point." Brady had to admit the sight was striking, though beauty seemed inadequate to describe the mountain's impact. Torghatten possessed an otherworldly quality that suggested significance beyond mere geographical interest. The whole seemed to watch their approach with patient attention, and Brady found himself remembering Nyarlathotep's promise that all seekers eventually found their way to his embrace. "Sir," Vickland shouted from his position at the bow, "there's something in the water ahead." The crew gathered at the rail. A small boat drifted 100 yards away, riding low as though flooded. "Lifeboat," Captain Toft observed through his spyglass. "From a larger vessel, by the look of her construction." "Could it be from the Marlin?" Wren asked excitedly. "Possible. We should investigate regardless. Maritime law requires assistance to vessels in distress." As they drew closer, Brady saw the boat more clearly. What it had taken for cargo was a huddled human figure. "Survivor," Dr. Dalton called, already preparing his medical bag. "We must get him aboard immediately." The rescue proved challenging. The castaway was barely conscious, dehydrated, unable to assist. Brady was shocked by his condition. A man in his 30s with weathered hands, face gaunt with exposure. More disturbing were extensive scratches covering his arms, deliberate wounds as though self-inflicted. "Get him below," Dr. Dalton ordered. "He needs warmth, fluids, and immediate medical attention." As they carried him to the galley, Brady noticed his lips moving in desperate whispered muttering. "Easy now," Dr. Dalton said soothingly. "You're safe. Can you tell us your name?" The castaway's eyes snapped open, bloodshot but clear. Brady noticed a strange coloration, not quite black and not quite blue, that reminded him of his vision. "Roddy," he croaked, his voice raw from dehydration. "Name's Roddy, but safe? None of us are safe. It offered us a choice, let it in or suffer with madness. What choice is that?" Brady grabbed Roddy by the shoulders, the stress of the man spreading to his own mind. "What did? Who offered you a choice?" The man's gaze fixed on Brady with uncomfortable intensity. "You've seen it too, I can tell. This man knows what's coming." Dr. Dalton frowned as he continued his examination. "Sir, you've suffered severe exposure. Perhaps some water." "Water?" The castaway struggled upright with surprising strength. "Don't drink the water near the mountain. It carries their essence, spreads their influence. That's how it begins. In the water, in the air, in the very stones of that cursed place." Penrose had been listening from the galley's entrance. "My good man, you're clearly suffering from delusional episodes. Dr. Dalton will provide proper treatment." "Treatment?" Roddy laughed bitterly. "No cure for their touch. I let it in, saved from madness, but I can feel it crawling beneath my skin, preparing me for his purposes." Brady knelt beside the man's makeshift bed. "What ship were you on?" "The Marlin. Dr. Brown's expedition. They thought they were scientists. They were tools being prepared for harvest." He leant forward to Brady's ear, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "I let it in. I have to bring others. Someone better." Dr. Dalton completed his examination. Severe dehydration, exposure, self-inflicted injuries. Look at his fingernails. This man has repeatedly scratched himself. "We should return to port immediately," Brady said urgently. "This man needs help we can't provide." "Nonsense," Penrose declared. "Dr. Dalton is perfectly capable of treating exposure and delirium. We cannot allow hysteria to derail our mission." Roddy grabbed Brady's arm desperately. "The others from the Marlin, madness consumed them, turned them into something else. They're not men anymore. Brown thinks he's leading them, but they serve other purposes. They wait on the other side of the mountain." His voice weakened as exhaustion overcame him. Kill me while I'm still mostly human, please." Dr. Dalton administered a small, calming dose of laudanum, and Roddy's struggles gradually ceased. As he slipped into unconsciousness, Brady found himself deeply troubled by the man's account and the strange coloration he had glimpsed in his eyes. Brady knew their expedition had crossed a threshold from which there might be no return. Roddy's warning echoed in his memory. They let me escape. The entire encounter had been orchestrated to draw them forward, to demonstrate the consequences of resistance while ensuring they continued toward their appointment at Torghatten. Outside, fog continued to lift, revealing more of the mountain's imposing presence. Brady could see the great hole clearly now, and despite the distance, he felt the weight of ancient attention focused upon their small vessel. Somewhere in those depths, Nyarlathotep waited with patience born of eons, confident that all seekers would eventually find their way to his embrace. The trap was closing, and Brady realized that their only hope lay in somehow convincing his companions to abandon their mission before they sailed directly into the spirit's arms. Roddy died at sunset. Brady had been watching over him in the small hours after Dr. Dalton administered the laudanum, hoping the man might provide additional warnings when he regained consciousness. Instead, he witnessed the final moments of a soul's desperate struggle against an alien influence that had taken root in human flesh. The end came quietly. One moment Roddy was breathing in the shallow, laboured pattern of severe exhaustion. The next, his chest simply stopped rising. Dr. Dalton came immediately and confirmed what Brady already knew. Death had taken him, a victim of whatever horror awaited them at Torghatten. Exposure and dehydration, Dr. Dalton pronounced after a brief examination. His constitution was simply too weakened to recover, a tragedy, but hardly unexpected given his condition. Brady said nothing, but continued watching the corpse with growing unease. Something was wrong, not with the doctor's diagnosis, which seemed accurate enough, but with what was happening to the dead man's body. Roddy's face, which had shown such desperate awareness in life, now displayed an expression of profound peace that seemed entirely unnatural given the circumstances of his death. "Sir," Brady ventured carefully, "might I suggest we examine him more thoroughly first? He spoke of changes, of something growing within him." Dalton frowned. "The man was clearly delusional, Brady. Exposure often produces such symptoms. However, if it would ease your mind." The physician began a more detailed post-mortem examination, while Brady held an oil lamp to provide adequate illumination. The galley's confined quarters made the work difficult, but Dalton approached the task with his customary professional competence. Severe malnutrition, signs of prolonged exposure to cold and salt water, extensive self-inflicted scratching, Dalton catalogued. Nothing that suggests. What in God's name? Brady leaned closer to see what had alarmed the physician. From the corpse's partially open mouth, something dark was beginning to emerge, a shapeless, twitching, crawling, formless thing that defied easy description. "My God," Dr. Dalton whispered, his voice carrying a mixture of scientific fascination and growing horror. "What manner of creature is this?" The thing that emerged from the dead man's throat was roughly the size of Brady's thumb, but its form seemed to shift and flow rather than maintain any fixed structure. Its coloration was not quite black and not quite blue, the same strange hue Brady remembered from his vision, and it moved with purposeful intelligence rather than mere instinct. "Quickly!" Dalton reached for another specimen jar. "We must preserve it for study." But the creature seemed to anticipate their intentions. It moved with surprising speed, skittering across the galley table toward the shadows in the corner. Brady lunged to intercept it, but the thing proved remarkably elusive, flowing between his fingers like liquid when he thought he had grasped it securely. "There!" Dalton pointed toward a gap in the hull planking. "It's trying to reach the water." They managed to corner the creature before it could escape, though Brady noted how its movements seemed less random than purposeful, as though it possessed clear objectives rather than operating on simple survival instinct. When Dr. Dalton finally succeeded in capturing it, The thing's behavior in the specimen jar suggested intelligence and malevolent awareness. Extraordinary, Dalton breathed, studying their captive by lamplight. The morphology suggests both terrestrial and marine ancestry, yet its behavior suggests a neural complexity far beyond what such size should accommodate. Brady watched the creature with growing revulsion. It seemed to be studying them in return, its movement patterns suggesting it was testing the jar's constraints while evaluating its captor's weaknesses. "Dr. Dalton," Brady said carefully, "Roddy spoke of these things carrying some sort of influence. What if exposure poses danger beyond mere physical harm?" "Interesting hypothesis. Some sort of tropical parasite, perhaps. Many parasites do affect host behavior to facilitate their own reproduction, though the mechanism would have to be remarkably sophisticated to produce the symptoms we observed." Brady decided to risk sharing more specific information. "Sir, during the ceremony last night, I experienced visions that might be relevant. I saw a creature with this color and a similar but larger form, a creature that dwells beneath Tor Gatten." Dalton looked up from his examination with surprise. "Visions? Brady, you understand that traditional shamanic practices often involve hallucinogenic substances? The experiences, however vivid, shouldn't be considered factual." "But what if they were accurate, sir? What if we're sailing towards something that uses parasites to corrupt human beings?" The physician set down his specimen jar and regarded Brady with kind but concerned eyes. "I appreciate your desire to find meaning in what you experienced. However, we must distinguish between subjective vision and objective reality. This creature, whatever its unusual characteristics, is simply a previously unknown species of marine parasite." Brady felt the familiar frustration of trying to convince someone who had already decided what constituted acceptable evidence. Dalton's rational perspective could accommodate unusual parasites, but not malevolent entities that commanded them for purposes beyond human understanding. "Sir, the castaway warned that the crew of the Marlin had been changed by exposure to these things. What if we encounter that vessel?" "Then we'll provide whatever medical assistance lies within our capabilities," Dalton replied firmly. "If disease is indeed spreading among Dr. Brown's expedition, our duty as civilized men requires us to render aid." Their conversation was interrupted by footsteps on the deck above. Professor Penrose's voice carried clearly through the galley's thin ceiling as he called for assembly of the expedition members. "Gentlemen, our position has been confirmed. We are approximately 1 hour from the perspective point depicted in those mysterious paintings. I believe it's time to locate the Marlin and determine what discoveries Dr. Brown's expedition has made." Brady and Dr. Dalton exchanged glances. The physician carefully secured the specimen jar before following Brady up to the main deck, where they found their companions studying Torghatten through Captain Toft's spyglass. "Any sign of the Marlin, sir?" Brady asked. "Not yet," Wren replied, lowering the instrument. "Though we haven't completed a full survey of the waters around the mountain, Dr. Brown might have found a sheltered anchorage on the far side." Captain Toft consulted his charts and the mountain's position relative to their current heading. "If they're conducting close examination of the formation, they'd likely anchor in the lee of the island, protected from weather, but close enough for detailed observation." "Then that's where we'll look," Penrose declared. "Mr. Vickland, please assist the captain in plotting our approach." As the Arena adjusted course toward Torghatten's far shore, Brady found himself studying the mountain with new appreciation for its ominous significance. The great hole no longer seemed like a mere geological curiosity, but rather like a doorway whose threshold they were rapidly approaching. In his medical bag, Dr. Dalton carried a specimen jar containing a creature that served whatever entity dwelt within that mountain. Despite the physician's scientific rationalization, Brady knew they possessed evidence of a threat that transcended conventional understanding. The question that haunted him was whether such evidence would matter when they finally encountered the source of the corruption that had claimed the Marlin's crew. In his vision, Nyarlathotep had spoken of transformation as a gift, of service as enlightenment. Brady suspected that academic curiosity and medical training might prove inadequate defenses against an entity that had perfected the art of corruption over geological ages. As evening approached and Torhattan's shadow stretched across the darkening waters, Brady prepared himself for whatever awaited them in the mountain's embrace. Despite his warnings, the crew sailed blindly forwards. He had marched bravely into battle, but this chilled him in a way far deeper than the Arctic winds ever could. The Marlin appeared through the morning mist like a ghost ship from maritime legend. Captain Toft spotted her first as they rounded Torhattan's eastern shore, his experienced eye catching the distinctive lines of a schooner even at considerable distance. "There she is," he announced, lowering his spyglass. "Anchored in the lee of the island, just as predicted. But something's amiss. No lookouts posted. No signals acknowledge our approach." Brady studied the distant vessel through the borrowed telescope, noting details that troubled his military-trained eye. The Marlin appeared perfectly maintained, sails properly furled, rigging in good order, yet most significantly, no crew members were visible on her decks despite the morning hour. "Perhaps they're all below," Professor Penrose suggested optimistically, engaged in cataloguing discoveries or analysing specimens. Dr. Dalton had joined them at the rail, his medical bag secured at his side. "Or they've encountered the same sort of illness that afflicted our castaway. We should approach with caution." Wren was studying the schooner's position relative to the mountain. "They've anchored directly opposite the Great Hole. Exactly where one would expect if they were attempting detailed examination of the formation's interior." As the arena drew closer, the Marlin appeared increasingly well maintained and orderly, which only made her complete silence more disturbing. Her deck planking was clean, her brass fittings polished, everything suggested a vessel in perfect working condition. Most ominously, a peculiar odour began to reach them across the water, something that combined the normal sense of ship and sea with an underlying corruption that made Brady's stomach clench. "Ahoy the Marlin!" Captain Toft called through his speaking trumpet. "This is Captain Toft of the Ketch Arena. Do you require assistance?" The silence that followed was profound and unnatural. Even accounting for the possibility that the crew might be below deck, some response should have been forthcoming. Ships at anchor in remote waters maintained watches precisely to respond to such hails. "We should board her," Penrose declared. "Academic courtesy requires us to determine Dr. Brown's condition and offer assistance if needed." Brady felt his soldier's instincts screaming warnings. Everything about the situation suggested danger, the abandoned appearance, the unnatural silence, the subtle wrongness that hung over the entire scene. Yet he also recognized that retreat was no longer possible. They had sailed too far and invested too much to turn back based on mere suspicion. "Brady will lead a boarding party," Captain Toft decided. "Brady, Vickland, and one of the expedition members. The rest remain aboard the arena in case we need to depart quickly." "I must come," Penrose insisted. "If Dr. Brown has made discoveries, I need to evaluate them personally." "And I should examine any crew members who might be ill," Dr. Dalton added. "Professor," Captain Toft said firmly, "with respect, if there's illness aboard that vessel, we need our physician on the boarding party, not our expedition leader. You'll remain here with me while Dr. Dalton accompanies the others." Penrose looked as though he might object, but the captain's tone brooked no argument. "Very well," he agreed reluctantly, "but I expect a full report on any discoveries." Brady felt relieved that Dalton would be joining them. The physician's steady competence would be invaluable if they encountered unknown dangers aboard the Marlin. The short journey to the Marlin in the ship's boat provided opportunity to study their destination more closely. The schooner appeared immaculate, her hull freshly painted, her rigging perfectly maintained, everything suggesting a vessel in excellent condition. "Too quiet," Brady observed quietly to Vickland as they approached the schooner's boarding ladder. The Norwegian nodded grimly. "A ship this well maintained should have crew visible. Something is very wrong here." Boarding the Marlin proved eerily simple. The vessel was unguarded, deck abandoned but spotlessly clean. Brady catalogued potential threats, while his companions examined the unnaturally pristine conditions. Everything appears in perfect order, Dr. Dalton observed, noting the immaculate deck planking. Yet, where is the crew? Wren was studying the ship's equipment. All their scientific instruments are properly stowed, nothing out of place. It's as though they simply vanished. Brady lifted his rifle, a breach of civilian etiquette perhaps, but his instincts demanded immediate access to defensive capability. The weapon's familiar weight provided some comfort in circumstances that felt increasingly threatening. The upper deck revealed no signs of struggle or disturbance. Personal belongings remained neatly arranged, equipment properly secured. The crew must be below, Dalton decided. We should investigate the cabins. Descent into the Marlin's interior proved nightmarish. The smell became overwhelming, corruption, decay, and something chemical that burned the throat. They found the crew in the main cabin. 7 men sat around the table as if in conversation, but appeared dead. Their skin possessed unhealthy pallor, heads at unnatural angles. "Poor devils," Wren whispered. "What could have happened to them?" Dr. Dalton approached cautiously. "I should examine them." Brady watched as the physician approached Dr. Brown's gaunt, pale form. As Dalton leaned forward, Brady noticed something that chilled his blood. "Doctor," he said urgently, "look at their breathing." Dalton paused, watching carefully. "They're not breathing," he confirmed. But then, impossibly, one of the seated figures gave a slight twitch, his fingers jerking spasmodically. "That's not normal," Brady muttered, his soldier's instincts screaming danger. Dr. Dalton leaned closer to examine Dr. Brown's eyes, gently lifting an eyelid. What he saw there made him recoil in shock and horror. "Milky white," he breathed. "Completely milky white, as though—" He turned to Brady with growing alarm. "You were right. Something terrible has happened here. We need to leave this place immediately." But even as Dr. Dalton spoke, the impossible began to happen. In perfect unison, all 7 seated figures began to move. Their heads rose slowly, their backs straightened with jerky, mechanical movements, and their milky white eyes turned toward the boarding party with malevolent awareness. Brady leveled his rifle as the things that had once been human began to rise from their chairs with unnatural coordination. "God help us," he whispered. The creatures moved with terrifying purpose, advancing with relentless determination. Brady's shot struck what was once Dr. Brown, producing dark ichor but failing to slow it. The fight was unlike anything Brady had experienced. His opponents felt no pain, showed no fear, continued attacking despite fatal injuries. They moved slowly, but kept coming with mechanical persistence. Victorien proved capable in combat, wielding his boarding axe effectively against the much slower foes. Wren and Dr. Dalton stayed close to Brady. "They just keep coming," Victorien shouted during a brief respite. "How do we stop them?" "Keep hitting them," Brady shouted, driving his bayonet into the nearest creature. "Eventually they have to fall." Gradually their attacks began to tell. The creatures staggered, their movements growing sluggish, coordination breaking down. One by one they faltered until the last transformed crewman collapsed at their feet. "We need to get back to the arena," Dr. Dalton said grimly. "Captain Toff needs to know what we've found here." They made their way back to the upper deck and their boarding boat in silence, each man processing the horror of what they had witnessed. Behind them, the Marlin's silent bulk loomed like a monument to some unimaginable catastrophe. As they rowed back toward the arena, Brady found himself wondering what had transformed Dr. Brown's expedition into those shambling horrors, and whether the same fate awaited them all. In Professor Blackwood's study, both men sat in contemplative silence as the implications of Brady's account settled over them. "First Cthulhu beneath the ocean depths," Nathaniel said finally, "and now this entity, Nyarlathotep, lurking beneath a Norwegian mountain. How many such ancient creatures of evil dwell in the dark places of the earth?" "Too many, I fear," Blackwood replied grimly. The young soldier's account suggests these entities possess intelligence and patience far beyond human comprehension. They lay traps spanning decades, perhaps centuries, to achieve their purposes. The question that troubles me, Nathaniel continued, is whether Brady and his companions managed to escape the trap that had been so carefully prepared for them. Blackwood closed the leather-bound journal carefully. This is precisely the point I had gotten to in my reading before you arrived today, my friend. Brady's first journal ends here, but there is a second volume among the papers. He gestured toward the remaining documents. The conclusion of young Brady's extraordinary tale remains unknown to me. Then we have more revelations ahead, Nathaniel said quietly. Shall we discover how this expedition concluded, and what became of the crew of the Arena? Blackwood reached for the next journal, and the fate of the expedition waited within.